Welcome to Alaska Weather, a production of Alaska Public Media and the National Weather Service, Alaska Region. Produced and broadcast daily from the studios of KAKM, Alaska Weather provides complete forecasts, public, marine, and aviation for all of Alaska. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.
Good evening, everyone. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder with the National Weather Service. It's the 21st of November. As always, we encourage you to visit our website at arh.noaa.gov or weather.gov and click on Alaska. And that's where you'll get the rest of the story from what we're going to talk about here tonight. The weather info line is open at 800-472-0391. Find every Weather Service office, especially those in Alaska, on Twitter, NWS Anchorage, NWS Fairbanks, or NWS Juneau. Find us on Facebook under U.S. National Weather Service Alaska, and find us on YouTube. In the mid-afternoon, you'll get a quick brief of what's going on around the entire state, a lot of what goes on with the surface charts there. And after this show on Alaska Public, on their YouTube channel, you'll be able to find the entire show for your review later on in the evening if that better suits your needs. You can search AKWX TV and find that whole show there. Here's a look at what's going on around our entire state, and I'll warn you, we have a litany of warnings, watches, and advisories for pretty much the entire state tonight. For Southeast, a winter storm warning continues now for the northern parts of Southeast all the way around through Yakutat and the northern Gulf Coast. Heavy snow's been falling in some of those areas, and some places like Gustavus have picked up 30 inches of snow already, and it's still snowing there. Rain has been moving through Sitka, where temperatures began this morning in the lower 30s and were approaching 50 degrees by late afternoon. So that warm air and the boundary that's creating all the snow is lifting northward, but it's going to be a slow progression northward through the rest of the night. It may eventually change over to rain as you head into tomorrow for places like Juneau, but for right now, periods of heavy snow may continue through the night there, so a winter storm warning still in effect there. The green shaded area for the Copper River Basin is a freezing rain advisory. That'll go until midnight there, and for a large part of South Central, a winter weather advisory is in effect. That includes periods of snow and freezing rain tonight. Most areas will see only trace amounts or very light amounts of freezing rain, but we also have a blizzard warning for the Thompson Pass area around Valdez. So again, some heavy snow and wind possibilities for that area. Looking northward, a blizzard warning is going to start up for the Alaska Range around Denali and points eastward there. So expecting some windy and snowy weather, winter weather or wind chill advisories and winter weather advisories for the Tanana Valley area, eastward to Tok and Northway this morning. In case you hadn't heard, areas around Tok were pretty close to 50 below this morning. Katie wrote in and sent us an email saying that was the case there. So first time this season that temperatures had dropped to 50 below. Let's look a little bit further northward. And the pink shaded areas here indicate winter weather advisories for the Yukon Flats out toward Bettles and Tanana Valley there. That will include areas of snow and perhaps poor visibility as well as some gusty winds, but perhaps not enough to drive down that wind chill value to those dangerous levels that we'll have a little bit further east, including areas around Fairbanks. But again, winter weather advisories are in effect for most of the upper and middle Tanana valleys as well. Looks like we've got a winter storm watch for areas around Galena, southward into the Grayling area, as well as the lower and middle Yukon valleys there. So it's not a winter storm warning yet, but we're watching for conditions to set up to perhaps worsen as we get into Friday. And blizzard warnings starting tomorrow and going into Saturday for the central and eastern Beaufort Seacoast. Looking for poor visibility and blowing snow there from Prudhoe Bay, Dead Horse, and eastward toward Kaktovik. Looking south and west, including areas along Aniak and Kuskokwim Valley, out toward Dillingham and King Salmon. Looking at winter weather advisories there, mainly due to freezing precipitation, areas of light freezing precipitation, so that will continue. There is possibly no way that we could cover every small detail that goes into every one of these areas that we just mentioned. So again, head to the website, listen to your NOAA Weather Radio for your local information on exactly what those warnings, watches, and advisories mean to you. We're going to focus on the big picture here of what's coming our way and what is working through the area right now, looking out toward the west at what is coming our way still across the western parts of the Bering Sea and the North Pacific. You can see another surge of moisture working toward the western Aleutians. As you look at the low clouds working through the Bering Sea, a lot of cold air is dropping southward, but for right now, that warmer air is still banked up to the southern side of the Aleutian, so this hasn't really quite made it north of the Aleutian chain just yet. You'll notice several circulations, one of those south of the Kamchatka Peninsula and several other areas indicating a lot of cold air back across eastern parts of Siberia. That's pretty timely, of course, for the season, but the trick is how long will some of that be held at bay while those circulations down across the North Pacific are trying to send warmer air northward. And that's exactly what we have going on across the Gulf of Alaska right now. A huge swath of moisture once again working its way through the Gulf. Earlier yesterday, it was really focusing primarily on southeastern Alaska. That's where the snow was beginning, and it started to work its way across through the daytime today. And as you noticed this morning, a lot of cloud cover is working over south central and Kodiak, blowing and drifting snow in some cases there, and it looks like that will continue to be the case as we get up into the Alaska range tonight and into tomorrow. You can see that upper level layer of clouds that's overtaking a large part of Alaska, especially southwest and south central and certainly southeastern Alaska as of yesterday, also through British Columbia and the southern parts of the Yukon. Still looking at very cold and dry air across most of the interior, but that's going to gradually weaken as that very warm and wet air works its way into the interior. It's coming up and overrunning that cold and dry layer. And that's what's creating that threat for freezing precipitation. It's not that temperatures won't be cold enough to support snow, it's that the air up above is just too warm. And it's falling as rain. At the last second, it's freezing on contact instead of remaining as an ice crystal. So out across the west, you can see some drier air working around the western tip of the Seward Peninsula. It looks like there is some snow in your forecast as we go ahead in the next couple of days. But for right now, the main forecast is really focusing on some very strong forcing of warm and wet air from even the subtropics all the way down toward Hawaii if you look at the larger satellite picture. And another disturbance across the Beaufort Seacoast is pushing in moisture right across the central and eastern Beaufort coast, and again that will continue to create snow and blowing snow probably in the very near term. Here's a look at the weather map, and that warm air stretches all the way from Kodiak Island into the parts of southeast, looking at turbulence issues with this, poor visibility, and of course freezing precipitation, not to mention the heavy snow that's already falling and continues to fall there. Snow will continue to spread northward through the rest of tonight across south central. Places around Anchorage and the Matanuska-Susitna Valleys, the Copper River Basin, may be looking at some light accumulation, perhaps a couple inches, but you're also talking about freezing precipitation on top of that. One of the key areas looks to be around the Copper River Basin, where you could pick up some light accumulation of ice there. Most areas around south central are only looking at 1/10 of an inch or less, so probably not a huge amount, but enough to make some impacts on the roads if you're trying to travel, and certainly not great to fly through. For areas across the Gulf, periods of heavy rain will continue there, and that warmer air is lifting northward, gradually winding down the snow threat across southeast. But with heavy snow on the ground and adding rain on top of that, the snow loading issue for your rooftops probably won't be such a hot thing. Out across the west, light snow will be possible. Blowing and drifting snow probably more of a threat there across the south and western parts of Alaska, and blowing snow will continue to be a threat across the northern parts of the interior, the Brooks Range, and the Arctic coast. Looking ahead to tonight and tomorrow, snow continues to develop across more northern locations, including areas surrounding the Fairbanks area and the middle Tanana Valley, but the real focus, it looks like, will be to the south and north of that region. Eastward, the winds will be blowing, so wind chill advisories again are posted for those areas, with very cold air still entrenched across the upper Yukon and the upper Tanana valleys. Any moving air will make that feel even worse. Low pressure across the southwest at 988 millibars is driving northerly winds into the eastern Aleutians, and here comes another storm poking its way up from the North Pacific at 984 millibars. That's on Friday. You'll notice the rain starts to wind down across southeast. A few showers there. High pressure sitting across the central Gulf was trying to end the precipitation across south central, but it will be slow to happen, so look for periods of snow perhaps into Saturday. And more snow developing across the northern interior. Snow showers for places around Fairbanks and points west. And snow and blowing snow continues for the Arctic coast and the west. Afternoon temperatures today, huge difference. If you kind of draw a line from Sitka into Petersburg and points southward, you can really see a huge change. In fact, even more south than that, down toward Ketchikan, temperatures there in the 40s to almost 50 degrees northward, 20s and 30s. Teens farther inland. Around Prince William Sound, temperatures were in the upper 20s and lower 30s. Cordova 39 degrees, Valdez should say 27. Wasilla 6, 12 in Anchorage earlier this afternoon, 14 in Kenai. For the interior and points northward, anywhere from 10 to about 20 below there in Fairbanks. Around Fort Yukon and Arctic Village, 25 to about 35 below. The Arctic coast, anywhere from 10 to 30 below. Around the Kotzebue Sound region, 0 to 10 below. Nome was showing 10. Around Grayling and McGrath, about 4 below this afternoon, 0 around Bethel, and earlier it looked like places a little bit farther south and west toward Bristol Bay were in the teens and 20s, with the Alaska Peninsula holding below freezing, and most of the Aleutians also in the 30s and 40s, with the Pribilofs in the mid-20s. Overnight low temperatures showing signs of warming up. In fact, most areas in south central will be looking at temperatures rising overnight. Southeast could be the case, especially for southern locations. There 30s and 40s for you, 26 around Juneau. For the interior, well below zero, anywhere from 15 to about 30 below. Looks like Arctic Village around 32 below. The Arctic Coast 10 to 15 below. Nome expect around 0. Unalakleet nearly 3 below. Bethel about the same. Nunivak Island around 11. Kodiak 32, and 20s and 30s for the Aleutians, with high temperatures in the interior tomorrow breaking into the single digits, so huge warm up for you. 15 around Nome, 1 above in Barrow. South central temperatures will gradually rise to or just past the freezing level, and then south of Kenai, Homer, and Seward, you're looking at readings that could approach 40 degrees, 34 in Kodiak, and lower to mid-40s for most of central and southern parts of the Panhandle. Haines, though, holding around 33, with Dutch Harbor about 35. Flying weather, we expect a wide swath of IFR conditions through the daytime tomorrow for southwest, the Alaska Peninsula, Kodiak Island, south central, but you can see a very sharp break point there northward. It looks like once we get up toward the Alaska range, while the winds will be rough, visibility shouldn't be that bad. So areas of sketchy MVFR maybe across the southern facing slopes of the Brooks Range and perhaps the Beaufort Seacoast, many areas in the Aleutians, and IFR conditions will continue there for southeast. Your pass conditions, Anaktuvuk Pass, probably VFR. The south entrance may start out at MVFR, but things should clear up if you're able to make it through that. VFR conditions for Adigan Pass, Lake Clark and Merrill Pass, Rainy Pass, as well as Windy Pass. We all expect those to be instrument flight rated. Isabel Pass, probably IFR. We may see that trend develop there in Mentasta Pass. Tonita Pass, expect to be IFR throughout the day, and Portage Pass. On the west side, if you're flying the Cook Inlet, Prince William Sound side, and in the pass itself will all be IFR. Chilkoot and White Pass may see some improvements as we go throughout your Friday. The surface freezing line shows that huge intrusion of warm and wet air working its way through the Gulf, but you notice that that doesn't make it too far inland at all. The surface freezing line itself is just south of the Pribilofs, hanging right over the Alaska Peninsula, right over the Kenai Peninsula and around Prince William Sound, and pretty much hugging the high terrain of south and east. But as we've seen with the temperature plots, all of the interior is obviously well below zero at this point. Icing potential will really focus on the greatest threat, mainly below 9,000 feet, with a threat of freezing rain here across south central and over the Matanuska-Susitna valleys, and also the Copper River Basin for that matter. Take great caution if you are able to get off the ground tomorrow. You might not be in the air very long if you're flying through freezing rain. So again, examine that threat very carefully. South-facing slopes of the Brooks Range up through the Yukon Valley, and over southwest, probably below 4,000 to 6,000 feet. There may be some occasional moderate icing threats there, and also across areas ahead of that warm front and just south where that trail of moisture extends into the deep Pacific. Looking at the upper level weather pattern, a trough of low pressure sits across western Alaska. We have a deep surge of south and westerly flow moving into south central and southeast. Another trough across the west coast that is holding back a ridge of high pressure here across the eastern Pacific Ocean. With that, we're getting that sharp contrast from south to north that's driving this weather into Alaska, with a pretty broad west to easterly flow across the central and northern Pacific there. For right now, holding back some of the deepest cold air. Low pressure across the west coast, guiding in those winds from 40 to about 50 knots, almost south-southwest across the eastern and northern parts of the Gulf. You can see the east to westerly flow across northern Alaska and a northerly flow across the west coast, with another surge of low pressure working its way up toward the western and central Aleutians. At 3,000 feet, the winds there are picking up a little bit faster out across the northern parts of the Pacific and the western Aleutians. For the west coast, wind speeds picking up from north to south across the west coast, 40 to 50 knots there. And we see a similar pattern across the Gulf, with a stronger southerly surge across the central and eastern parts of the Panhandle. Easterlies continue at this level also across the Arctic coast, 30 to 35 knots. So turbulence abounds, but the main factor for most areas will be the visibility, I think, across the southern parts of Alaska, as well as the icing potential there. You will run into some turbulence issues across the northern parts of the Gulf as that warmer air is slowly lifting northward. Do expect some turbulence issues and storm warnings at the surface as we get into our marine forecast here in just a little bit, but gusty winds certainly will be affecting most of southeast throughout the daytime tomorrow. Turbulence, if you're flying, below 8,000 to 12,000 feet across eastern and southeastern parts of Alaska, below 6,000 feet in the north, and below 6,000 feet also across the west and southwest. That's your aviation forecast. Again, all of this on YouTube at AKWX TV. We'll be back with your marine weather here in just a few minutes.
Hello everyone and welcome to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm Jim Peranto. Today in the studio I have the pleasure of talking to Mike Burdett, who is an oceanographer at NOAA's National Data Buoy Center, which is located at Stennis Space Center in Mississippi. And today Mike is going to talk to us about some of the instruments that they use over the water or near the water and how the data that those instruments compile are able to get to us out here in the public. Thanks, Mike, for showing up here in the studio and talking with us today.
Thank you. It's a great pleasure to be here.
Let's start off with the observing platforms. How many observing platforms does the Buoy Center have?
We currently have 94 weather buoys and 57 seaman stations around the coast that serve the National Weather Service and the public. In addition to that, we also have cooperative efforts and outreach efforts through regional associations around the country and other NOAA entities to provide data from another about 225 platforms, again spaced around the coastline. In addition to that, we also throughput data to the public and to the Weather Service from about 400 voluntary observing ships. So add all that up, and on a daily basis we're dealing with data from about 800 platforms.
Wow. Now, how many of those platforms are up here in Alaska?
We're in the process of expanding our work up here, and probably in about a year and a half when we finish that, we'll have 19 buoys here in the Alaska region and 9 seaman stations. The seaman stations are located mostly in central northern Alaska, along the Gulf of Alaska area there, and in southeast Alaska.
Okay, and I can think of a couple seaman stations. Isn't Bly Reef, is that a seaman station?
Yes, it is.
And then was St. Augustine, or
Augustine Island.
Yeah,
right?
Augustine Island.
Yeah.
That-
Essentially, those are stations that we go out and we put on either existing Coast Guard aids or lighthouses or things like that, places where either it's difficult to keep a buoy in place or makes more sense to keep a different type of platform there.
Now, why the different kinds of buoys? Why are there so many different kinds of buoys out
Well,
there?
as we try to provide observations, we have to consider the environment that we're trying to observe in. There are some areas that are extremely severe, such as the Bering Sea. There are other areas such as Prince William Sound or southeast Alaska where it may not be quite as severe, where we can keep some smaller buoys. An example of the larger buoys that we have are our 12-meter buoys that we keep in the Bering Sea. Those are very robust platforms, and we've had very good luck, and we've been very reliable there. We also have a 6-meter platform, which is a boat-shaped hull. And I have an example of that in a slide, which I think you can show the public there, which is something that we're building for the Shelikof Straits area. It again is one of our open ocean platforms, but we specifically built that to hopefully withstand the rigors in Shelikof Straits so that we can provide data for the public there.
What other new designs are in the offing for the Buoy Center? Is there anything that's coming up on the horizon that's even more state-of-the-art?
Yes, there are. We're starting to look ahead to the future and how we do our business and how better to do our business, how better to keep and maintain our platforms and keep the reliability up. And we're designing systems that are smaller in some cases, have specialized sensors on them, systems that will be able to be handled by different types of ships. Other than the Coast Guard ships that we currently use. We have systems that will have different and more sophisticated means of communications on them so that we can actually talk to them from Mississippi and change reporting parameters, averaging schemes, and all that remotely when the need arises.
So what do these buoys measure, and what does the buoy do with these measurements?
Okay. We typically measure things that forecasters and the public are interested in, such as winds, pressure, air temperature, waves, and the buoy has an internal computer, a central processing system that it uses to gather the observations from these sensors and make products out of them. Once it makes those products, it diverts them over to a satellite transmitter, which then sends it through either the GOES satellite or through a commercial satellite, Iridium, to a ground station, which gets to us via landline. It's a very long, involved process, but it only takes a couple of minutes to get to us as an observation. We look at those reports and we quality control them to make sure that they're good data, and then we turn it around and send it out for distribution to the National Weather Service and to the public. It's available to the public via several means. We have it available on a website, which they can get into very easily. We also have the dial-a-buoy system, which can be called into by either a cell phone or a satellite phone, and you can ask for specific observations from a buoy and get those immediately. And also, of course, the Weather Service has the All Hazards radio, which they put out the forecasts and also some weather observations on from our buoys.
And the dial-a-buoy system, this is is this a new program that has been implemented by the Buoy Center? How long has it been around?
It's been around for probably about 7 or 8 years now, probably.
Okay.
It's just an intelligent way of getting data out through computers to the public. It's one of these voice synthesized products
Gotcha.
that you can get.
Okay. I guess if people want to, use the dial-buoy system, they would just, like you said, use their phone and dial up the phone number, and then it's automated. They just punch around on their phone and get the specific information
That's
that
what
they
they
desire.
do. That's exactly right.
And you mentioned your website, and I need to mention how many hits you guys get every month, because it's absolutely astonishing. 20 million hits?
20 million a month now, that's
So
right.
That seems to be the place to go if you
is.
want information.
It is.
So the website there is www.ndbc.noaa.gov.
That's correct.
So that we want to throw that out there. That's the best place, in my opinion, to go get information from the Buoy Center. They also can contact the Buoy Center at the Stennis Space Center, which is in Mississippi,
Right.
as we mentioned before. Thanks for coming on in today.
It's great to be here, Jim. Thank you.
And thank you for joining us here on Alaska Weather Facts. Until next time.
Thanks, Jim. Here's the forecast for Southeast. As we were talking about, some pretty strong winds from the south and southeast, especially along that boundary that's moving northward with all the warm and wet air. Many areas still looking at storm warnings. Inside the southern inner channels there, 50 knots with a 10-foot sea. Across the coastal waters there, anywhere from 22 to 25 feet from Craig and the Dixon entrance all the way northward toward Yakutat, where those seas reach 25 feet. Higher gusts, of course, along that boundary, and again, that could make some flying issues, especially over southeast tomorrow. Winds there for the central and northern parts of the inner channels running around 35 knots with 7-foot seas. As we get into Saturday, more of a west and southwesterly push. The winds settle down substantially. Still looking at some higher swells there, mainly from the south, I believe. 15 to 16-foot seas across coastal areas, 20 to 25 knots, and the inner channels drop to about 20 to 30 knots, with some of the areas around the southern inner channels running from the south and east, and more of a southerly flow across the Lynn Canal. Around the south central areas, inside Prince William Sound, you're looking at a southeasterly flow, 35 knots with a 7-foot sea. Some higher gusts just outside of Kayak Island and some of the barrier islands there. More of a 45-knot wind from the south and west with a 17-foot sea. West and southwesterly flow coming across the Kenai Peninsula between 25 and 30 knots. 35 knots inside Shelikof Strait, where stronger winds prevailed there today. Westerlies will bring 7-foot seas across the region. 12-foot seas on the eastern side of Kodiak Island. And through Cook Inlet, look for the winds to become southwesterly with time. 20-knot winds there with 3 to 5-foot seas. Still looking at a south and southwesterly flow as we get into the weekend with 15 to 25-knot winds, 4 to 7-foot seas across the Cook Inlet. The Barren Islands and Kamishak Bay area looking at 20 to 30-knot winds from the south and west, 9 to 13-foot seas with the higher seas out toward the western Gulf, and 15 to 25-knot winds around Prince William Sound and Resurrection Bay on the eastern side of the Kenai Peninsula. 30-knot winds there as you come out of Kodiak, 12-foot seas expected there, again with the flow from the south and west. Across the Alaskan Peninsula, a broad westerly flow, 25 to 35 knots in some cases, with freezing spray an issue north of Coal Bay into the Bering Sea coast there. Around Saturday, more of a south and southwesterly flow developing across the western tip of the Alaska Peninsula with 8-foot seas on the south side, still holding on to higher seas on the north side at 11 feet, 12-foot seas there south and west of Kodiak Island and east of Chignik. As we look at the Aleutians, we're talking about some stronger winds across the western parts of the chain with more of a north and westerly flow developing around Nikolsky with westerlies there around Unalaska on either side. The stronger winds again in the west, those should start to settle down as we get into Saturday. More of a north and easterly flow driving the weather pattern across the central and eastern chain with 11 to 16-foot seas on the south side, 8 to 10-foot seas on the north side. For the west, a north and northwesterly flow there, 35 to 40 knots around St. Lawrence Island and Nunivak Island. Freezing spray will be an issue again, especially across the central and northern parts of the Bering as we get into Saturday. That continues, but the winds diminish in all areas, 25 to 30 knots with an 8-foot sea around the Pribilovs as we start up the weekend. Ice again is still holding east of Barrow, and we're seeing heavy freezing spray issues from Point Lay down to Point Hope and into the Kotzebue Sound region with 30 to 35 knot winds and 6 to 10-foot seas expected for Friday and into Saturday. Look for the heavy freezing spray threat to continue through the weekend with winds still strong just north of the Beaufort Seacoast at 30 to 35 knots from east to west. Recapping tonight's weather, if you go to weather.gov and click on Alaska, you will see a large part of Alaska lit up with winter weather storms, blizzards, and advisories, as well as freezing rain advisories for many areas in South Central. That will continue into the weekend there, so please do go to the website and check the very latest forecast for your area or village. Warmer air is lifting northward, and that is wringing out a ton of snow across southeast, some cases already more than 30 inches in places like Gustavus. Snow will fall across South Central, and it will mix in with freezing rain at times, some of that falling over the Copper River Basin. As low pressure moves over South Central, we can expect periods of rain, freezing rain, and snow across the Matanuska, Susitna valleys, and Anchorage as we go through your Friday. Snow will gradually start to slow down across southeast while spreading northward into the interior, and that's where we'll see more of that as we head into Saturday. More rain and snow for South Central. I'm meteorologist Dave Snyder. Thanks for watching Alaska Weather.
These forecasts are to be used for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating. Alaska Weather is made possible by the following sponsors.
The National Weather Service.